Hi and welcome, Jim from Avstar. Guys, I hope you're all doing well and that you're making your plans for what's happening in the next few weeks with the festive seasons. And I wanted to talk about in this video, first thing, which is the most important, we'll be doing the latest pole position on the 15th of this month. So we've got another 6 or so days to go. We'll get that out on Patreon if you're interested in knowing what's happening with the North Pole at the moment and its progression on its way over to Russia. But what I wanted to talk to you about is something that, short term, you should be prepping for this. And, obviously we're looking at just how much one of these multi-billionaires owns in just one country, America. You can see it's quite an acreage when it's combined. And, what we're seeing is mergers, and we've been seeing this for a long time. Companies merging with other companies, that company taking over more of the market because of its monopoly over the market. And, it's not rocket science. All it means is that more and more people are losing jobs as a result of their greed. And it will affect everybody. Price houses are estimated to drop between 20% and 40% over the next 12 months. Can you believe that? That's quite a hike. That means we are moving still closer to a global economic standstill. Now, it was said in 2008 there was hours away from that happening. They can't stop it this time because what they've been doing since 2008 is borrowing their way out of trouble. Now, there's no more real debt that they can add to the debt that they've got. Even if they print it up, all it does is increase inflation. I'm sure you've been following this because you're probably thinking, where's my money going at the end of the month? Well, what's happened to my salary? How come it's not as strong as it used to be? Well, the reason is supply and demand. More money in the market, the less value it has, and that works for pretty much anything you want to apply it to. Let's look at the labour force. If there's too many people in a market where there's not enough jobs, then what happens to the salaries? The salaries of the people that are in work drops because now there is a wider market for employers to choose from, and they can get more skills for less money. Probably more skills than what me and you have, and they will do that because they're ruthless. We know they are. We have seen just in the last 10 years the changes to the checkouts in the supermarkets, and the checkout ladies and men have disappeared. Now it's all itemised. And if you're buying things like alcohol, it's really annoying because you've got to wait for that one person to come over and tap that security card off and make sure that you're not underage. So, the system isn't better. More and more people have lost jobs. But it's going to get much worse because, they've dug themselves into a hole now. Hyperinflation is clearly obvious to every one of us. They can't borrow anymore because it will make it inflate even more. If they lower interest rates, they will cause inflation. What I'm saying is all the options that they had to get themselves out of a 1 hour crisis back in 2008, they don't have anymore. They've trapped themselves. And that's what I want you to prepare for. Because you might think you've got job security right now. Well, I can assure you, millions and millions of people around the world thought the same. We've seen over 1 million layoffs in America in just this year, and it's not over yet. And we've heard of companies like, companies leaving, the West and moving to more affordable labour markets like Mexico, Vietnam, and other Asian countries, and even India and Pakistan, those countries. And even countries that you'd never expect them to move their factories to. But the currency and their payable wage is so low that it's too much of a temptation to them. And when you tempt a pig with a nice Sunday dinner, you can guarantee the pig is going to go for it every time and fill himself up until his belly busts. And that's Bill Gates, that's Elon Musk. They're not world champions at anything. They are just, if they never had no money, they would never have able to do what they've done this time, at this time in our lives right now. Yeah, they got away with it when they did it, but they would never be able to do that now. It just isn't achievable. And what we're seeing is these hedge funds realise that. Now, what is the cause? First of all, I'll explain very briefly. Technology is increasing. Don't need so many people in the workforce. We know that. Just look at a car manufacturing plant, all robotics. Same across the range in every industry. So we've got an increase in technology, a decrease in the need for people, and then we have, the situation, which I don't think people like Goldman Sachs and other major banking companies like that take into consideration, which is another two things actually: increasing in population size, and what is the third in this vicious cycle? It is I deviated, and that's why it left my mind. So we've got increase in technology, decrease in labour, and then what do the people do then to obtain money other than receive benefits? And we've just seen what's happened in America with benefits and food stamps. We're seeing it here in the UK. There's been no improvement to benefits in this country for years and years and years. There's been, every time somebody has put themselves up for election for Prime Minister, they have never come through with the promise of benefit reform, because what they're doing is creating another problem here, guys, and you'll probably recognise it when I say it. If you put people in environments where they can't afford to go out, they can't afford to buy the food they like, they can't afford a car, they can barely afford the rent, they can't afford to put the gas on and have the electric on for as long as they used to, say 15 years ago, then what you do to that person is destroy their mental health. And that's what I wanted you to just think about for a minute. And that's what we're going to see, an absolute increase. Now, they complain in our country, in the UK, that there's too many young people on benefit PIPs. This is like a benefit for mental illness, yeah. And what they're saying is very insulting, if you ask me. They're saying that we're not going to pay PIPs extra monies to these people just because they suffer with anxiety. That is so rude of the government to say. So they're going to try and cut the benefits for the people that are on disability benefits, mental health benefits. They're going to cut the livable wage down for them that receive benefits. I mean, let's face it, some of these people's mental health are completely putting them out of the work market. There is no way that they could get a job with their illness. And mental illness also covers things like post-traumatic stress disorder, which veterans suffer a lot. But it's not just veterans, it's others that suffer that. And so when you cut the benefits to that, can you imagine what you're doing for the people that was willing to risk their lives for the rest of us in whatever country? It's disgraceful. And I hope now that the system collapses. I really do. Because what's going to happen, this is the way it's going to play out. They're going to keep increasing technology. We can see that most of the big six companies in the world are investing in AI and robotics. But what are the people going to do if they haven't got a job and they're being replaced with things that can do their job much better than them? What are people going to do to obtain money? And if the benefits aren't being reformed and the benefits are being paid, then the mental health is going to increase. You see, they haven't even thought about this. The problem is we've got a multifaceted problem on our hands now. And the clowns that run our countries, we've seen them. You know, Keir Starmer, Donald Trump, and all the others that have been there before him, like Biden. They haven't got a clue how to run things. Keir Starmer, his profession was a immigration lawyer, and he weren't no good at that. So he tries his hands at, the easy way to get money, which is become, an MP and then run to be elected. Because, we all know what they're doing, don't we? They're giving military contracts out, like left, right and centre to all the buddies. The money might not show up now in their accounts, but as soon as they leave that position, that's when it's going to show up in their accounts. And we've seen it. Tony Blair, who was a former Labour Prime Minister, is now worth over 100 million. So I don't understand why people like Donald Trump want to be a president, because the salary is crap. Considering he's a billionaire, it would be something pocket change for him. So why would he want to do that job? Just think about it. What motivates Donald Trump to do that job? Greed. And it puts him in a position to earn more and more money. And who's paying at the end of the day? The poorest in the world. They really are. It's disgraceful, guys. They come up with these excuses to make money, like we need to fund Ukraine, bombs and missiles, but no one's being audited with these weapons that can only come from the military stock supplies or the military companies connected to the military, just to give you for instance, here in the UK we've got what's it called? Doesn't come to my mind at the moment. It's a well-known military defence contractor anyhow, and that's one of them. You got Raytheon in America. It's funny I can remember them ones. Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, Boeing. They all profit from making missiles and bombs. But who's auditing any of this? How are we to know that a submarine launched 20 cruise missiles when no one is saying this is how many we launched and the proof of the launch is there? There cannot be no fraud in this. That is exactly what we used. Or when we give weapons away, who's to say how many weapons we give away? They exploit these people like Bill Gates and Elon Musk. They exploit the most poorest people to make them billionaires, multi-billionaires, worth over 200, 300, 400 billion. Money that they could never spend in 1,000 lifetimes. But they take more. And we're the ones that are always being punished for it. And, what annoys me about Bill Gates is, now he wants to build 3D printed meat. He wants us to eat maggot larvae. He will never eat maggot larvae in his life. They want to draw the components out of the air now to make margarine and butter. I think they're already doing it because, it was only a week ago that a company that makes tomato soup was exposed for using mechanically printed meat. It weren't even chicken in there, and there was pulled out into the public arena, and there's obviously loads of people talking about it, but it's always a gross public mistrust. And Keir Starmer needs to go. He's got to go. But he's so stubborn, this man. He says, I need another 9 years to fix the problem in the UK. He needs to go to prison for 9 years. That's what needs to happen to Keir Starmer. He really needs to go to prison for 9 years or more. there would have been no war in Ukraine started if it weren't for, you know, that guy who's got a really bad haircut, Boris Johnson, you know, a former Prime Minister. If he hadn't gone over to Ukraine and said, don't sign any of these contracts, you know, fight for your territory. Well, not even the Ukrainians want to fight for the territory now. The kids are leaving the country because of the, you know, kidnappings that are going on with the conscriptions. You know, we've seen recently in Germany the very same thing. You know, the thousands and thousands and thousands of people that took to the streets and said, no, we don't want you to have our children. And those younger children that are just about to leave secondary school and go into university, they're saying, no, we don't want to be conscripted. And possibly through into, if we carry on pushing Russia around, through into, you know, another European conflict, you know, which would be much worse if that happens than the Second World War back in the 1938s, 1939s, when that started. And that lasted 6 years at the cost of millions of people's lives. And we're seeing it all over again. That's why I say on this channel, people think that that mentality doesn't exist anymore, and it clearly does. Absolutely does. You know, it's only been less than 90 years, is it, since the Second World War? Or just around about 90 years? The mentality's gone, no, we haven't improved ourselves at all in the way we think. But so long as there can be money made in the manufacturing of weapons, they will be manufactured. And as long as they can keep coming up with things that we can't see physically, like carbon and CO2 in the atmosphere, then they will always use that as an excuse to pay for these green taxes. That we have to pay these green taxes so that they can build the wind turbines, which they purchase from China, and solar panels. And then they charge us 5 times more for our energy than any other country in Europe, because they're saying that we've had to invest this money, the taxpayers' money, in buying these things, whilst at the same time ruining the British open countryside and, you know, the rare agricultural land that we've got, and then screwing the farmers over with their inheritance tax. That's just a few of the truths that the Keir Starmer government have done. And now they're going after the most vulnerable people that are disabled and suffer with mental health. I don't know how true it was, but I did watch a YouTube video, and I know you can't always believe what you see. But within the last week apparently, in Glasgow, and I don't know, you might live in Glasgow, did it happen? Did 41 hotels that refugees were staying in get burnt down? And did the British government cover it up by the media? Because we know what the British government are doing. If media runs stories that haven't been verified and allayed by the government, then they get threatened to have their licence taken away from them, their broadcasting licence. And that's why, if you're here in the UK, you will notice a very softened down approach from GB News. It wasn't like that when it first started. I believe they're no better than the BBC and all the other media companies. So main media companies. I don't think they're any better now. So there's no, you know, when we get a little footing and one rug on the ladder, they cut that away. You see, it's all about now. To me, I can see it clearly. People used to tell me, and I'd say, nah, it ain't that bad. It really is all about controlling us. I heard that the police couldn't handle the crowd. One of the high-ranking officers in the police force that was monitoring some of these, these protests that were taking place that did turn almost into riots. You know, there was property destroyed, but I heard that there was 31 civilians to one police officer. and that there was so little numbers of the police officers and there was so many people from the public there that they were completely failing. So that's what I say, guys. We have got to prepare for this because it's going to happen. The stock markets are going to collapse because if people can't get jobs, technology took the job away. The population's increasing. How do people obtain money? But more so, this is the kicker. This is what the banks need to really realise, and JP Morgan and all the other big companies out there that do banking. If people haven't got a job, they've got no money, they can't pay the mortgage. If they can't pay the mortgage back to the bank, then the mortgage are sitting on a massive pile of debt in the trillions right now. And that is going to wipe the banks out. And Bill Gates will have his money wiped out as well. He thinks, it won't make any. Just think about this, how much has gold inflated in the last 5 years? It's over $4,000 just for that little tiny piece of shiny metal. That tells you how much money how much of our money is really not worth. And it's going to get much worse, and that's why we see the energy prices going up, because the government isn't governing these energy companies. They've removed all the legislation that stopped them doing it. One of them that stopped these bankers getting away with blue murder was the Glass-Steagall Act. There is an energy one, I can't remember it off the top of my head, but they removed that one as well. So, those are the times we're living in. And I don't want to keep repeating a quote from Gerald Celente, and I think he's an amazing guy, and he's spent his whole life, trying to fight for justice and peace. When people lose everything, they lose it. And the problem is, when I talk about this, is people think it's never going to happen. But, guys, it is happening. What you don't see is it crash tomorrow. That's what you're on about, but we will. We will see it crash one day tomorrow. I'm not talking far in the future. Maybe in the next 12 months. Could be even less. Because it's not sustainable what's taking place right now. You can't sustain this. And I don't believe that they have took any measures to protect people when it happens. Because we're already seeing the most vulnerable people being thrown under the truck by the government. And it's just a matter of time when it comes down to our turn. Me and you. If it hasn't already. So, I'm going to leave it there, guys, because I think the video is going on there for a good 25 minutes, isn't it? And, I want you to think about these things that are taking place. There's a link down there if you want to help support us. There's a PayPal link. You can donate whatever you want on that. And there's the Patreon link. It costs you about £3.90 to join us every month, and you get your Pole Shift news that way. And the only other thing for me to say is take serious now what people like me and a very few others that have been very censored on YouTube more serious. Because these things are going to happen. Okay, take care. Bye for now.